morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Three at the Back podcast and a brand new season, in fact, and our YouTube debut. As ever, I am joined by my good buddies Scott and Paul. Boys, how are you doing?
Great.
Wonderful.
A little bit of insider info there. This is the second time that we've recording this intro. So a couple of technical hiccups with the start of the recording today, but we hope that we are strong and stable now going forward, and we will be able to bring you some stats and data analysis from our resident FPL experts that will allow you to set up your FPL team going into the 25-26 season. And just to establish our expert knowledge, we are joined by Mr. Scott Barron, who placed 2.5 thousand in the world last season, 0.01% of the FPL playing community. So yeah, congratulations on your success last season, Scott. And
Thank you.
hopefully you can guide us through what will be a brand new season for us here. And
Well,
yeah,
we're all
hopefully-
pretty solid at it, to be honest, aren't we? Just varying degrees of fortune or misfortune, or in your case, just downright bad planning.
yeah, it's certainly the latter, I would say. I
Or
will
no
never
planning, as we should say.
exactly
Yeah.
that. Yeah. So obviously using all three of your tactical chips in like the first 8 weeks of the season is not advised. I can attest to making that mistake last season. Paolo, yourself very well established in our mini league, and I think yourself finished well into the six figures last year as well on the global rank as well.
Yeah, finished strong. A tale of two halves for me in last season's FPL. Yeah, fingers crossed I can get it right from the start and start strong. And I guess this is where we start here.
Absolutely. So, episode 1 of season 5. That's enough of the history talk. We're now looking forward to the present. This episode, we're going to be talking about the fixture release that happened just last Wednesday, and we've got a bunch of Opta stats to take you through fixture difficulty rating, and we've also got the official FPL fixture difficulty rating as well for the for the first 10 games. And I think we'll take a look at those graphics shortly. But the first thing that we all noticed was actually the significant difference actually between the ratings of the first 5 games. So in terms of short-term planning, but then over the course of the first 10 games, that rating seems to change quite dramatically. Certainly will be a test of how we play the game in terms of short-term planning and long-term planning. I will bring up that first 5 graphic for everybody now so we can take a look at that. And then we'll go through, we'll highlight some teams in the top end in terms of the difficulty rating and the bottom end in terms of easier start to the season, highlight some assets, we'll have a little chat and just see kind of like what comes out of that for everybody. And there we have it. So Manchester United at the top of the fixture difficulty rating for the first 5 games of the season. Kicking off the season with Arsenal on the Saturday. Paul, your immediate thoughts? Arsenal versus United. It was always a big fixture in the late 90s, early 2000s. It still feels like a pretty big fixture even now with, the club's fortunes having been quite separated over the last sort of 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, it's always a tough place to go. We don't have actually the best of records going to Old Trafford, so certainly not the easiest opening day fixture that we would have liked. And I think Arsenal hold a quite proud record of opening day victories. So fingers crossed we can. But it's not looking pretty rosy for either of us in the first 5, to be honest.
No, that's a fair statement.
Got nothing to do with a certain Club World Cup, maybe that's going on that we're not a part of, maybe. So they've probably given us more difficult fixtures to make TV a bit more exciting for the Premier League.
He's pulling out the everyone hates Arsenal conspiracy early this season.
Oh, No, Arsenal. I'm talking us, Man United, Liverpool. None of us are in the Club World Cup. Look where we are in the first 5 fixtures. Look what fixtures we've got compared to the teams that are in the Club World Cup.
It's an interesting point.
Hold on. Chelsea are in the Club World Cup. They play Palace on the opening day. What are you saying?
I'm saying the rest of their fixtures are pretty favourable.
Yeah, as you highlighted there, rightly so, Scotty. You're at the opposite end of that Opta table, presumably with the easiest 5 fixtures, or amongst the easiest 5 fixtures, actually tied with Villa on that difficulty rating there. As you said, Chelsea on the opening day, Forest, Villa, Sunderland, and West Ham. But we were talking pre-recording there, and actually a combination of Chelsea, Forest, and Villa based on last season's finishes. I mean, that's three of last season's top 7 teams. It's not that easy, I wouldn't have thought.
I guess if you're basing it off last year's results, we had 2 draws with Chelsea. We had a draw and a win against Villa, and I think a draw and a win against Forest as well. So based on that, maybe that's where they get in the race into head-to-heads. But no, you're right. Those first three games aren't particularly easy on paper, especially being away from home against Chelsea and Villa. I guess it's weighted against the Sunderland and West Ham fixtures. They might be amongst the 2 of the 4 seemingly easiest fixtures at the start, as we have them back to back. There's not many teams that have sort of back to back easier fixtures in those first 5. That's probably where the balance comes in.
Yeah, I mean that like logic dictates that you're correct in what you're saying. Like you said, you're bringing up the head-to-head from last year, and kind of just ignoring final table finish for those first three teams. Highlighting, of course, that Sunderland are one of the newly promoted teams. They came up via the playoffs from the Championship last year. Potentially going to be one of the teams that a lot of people target in terms of assets as well.
They're favourites for relegation as well. Bookies odds, they're 3 to 10 on to go down.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, but that's not just a slight on Sunderland either. That's a pattern recognition as well, that the 3 teams that have come up have gone straight back down in the 2 seasons consecutively.
But historically as well, that team coming up via the playoffs has always had the disadvantage going back as far as the playoffs was invented. That team coming up, they could have finished 6th in the Championship and get promoted, and you're a huge disadvantage by coming up, because I guess you're not deemed to be the 3rd best team on paper in the division.
Yeah, that seems fair. I think there's lots of teams that do finish 3rd in the Championship that don't make it into the Premier League via the playoffs for various reasons. And yeah, you're right. That definitely weights the odds against teams like Sunderland. And I think it was Ipswich that came up last year. They actually did finish 6th in the Championship and came up via the playoffs. And we saw kind of like how that played out. Although actually they were the better of the 3 teams that were promoted, ironically as well. So it's not always telling, but ultimately they were relegated as well.
Just on the bookies odds, the 3 teams that have come up are the 3 favourites to go down. And I think out of the established sides, Wolves are the next worst, but they're 4 to 1 to go down, where the others are odds on.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting that Wolves are down that end. I mean, obviously, were flirted with relegation for large parts of last year, but they finished quite strong in the end. I would have probably had someone like West Ham in and amongst those odds, like favourite to go down.
West Ham are the next in line. But you got to think Wolves have had their 2 best assets in Aït-Nouri and Cunha leave the club already. Going to be huge losses. Interesting to see who they bring in to paper those cracks.
Yeah, they're certainly hard assets to fill. So yeah, I can see why the bookies would have them down there. It'd be interesting to see what transfers they do make, but yeah, I think they probably will be one of the favourites to be down at the bottom end of the table, unfortunately.
Because if you fancy one of the newly promoted sides to stay up, it's obviously at the expense of an established Premiership sides. I mean, who do you pick? I mean, I guess Wolves are the likely candidate based on last couple of seasons. West Ham as well, maybe an Everton. But you're never going to be certain, are you, going and saying at the start of the season that one of those teams will go down.
No, it's a very good point. I guess if nothing else, if like someone like a Leeds or a Burnley can survive, bearing in mind obviously both of those teams scored 100 points in the Championship last year. They had absolutely stellar seasons. Probably one of the stronger promotion campaigns from both of those teams to come up. I mean, there's definitely money to be made, right? You want to put some money on Wolves or West Ham to go down at 4-1. It's a pretty tasty bet to take.
Well, I was going to say, as you said that Leeds and Burnley both were relegated the season before last. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
But
So they get the parachute payments and then they come back super strong out of the Championship. Do you think that sort of money was enough to project them into being the fourth worst team in the Premier League and staying up?
it's a difficult one to call right now because the other established teams also have a good level of money to invest back in their squads. It would just be who probably spends it better and who can get the better of the starts. Because as we have spoke previously, some of the teams that struggled were mainly due to their poor starts and weren't able to recover. So it'd be interesting to see how. I think this is why these first 10 fixtures will be crucial for picking our FPL teams.
So, am I right in thinking that over the first 10 that Burnley will have the hardest fixtures?
Yeah, that is correct, and I'll share that with everybody now because it'll be interesting, obviously, to see like the switch around. So just to kind of give you like a little snapshot here. So for example, like Manchester United and Arsenal have amongst the more difficult first 5 games. West Ham, Crystal Palace, Villa amongst the easier first 5 games. But what we'll do is now we'll show you the official FPL fixture difficulty rating, and this is across the 10 games, so over a longer period of time, which I can do now. There we go. And yeah, as you rightly pointed out, Scott, what you see there is obviously Burnley across the first 10 games are level with Crystal Palace, Fulham, and Manchester United as having the more difficult start to the season, whereas the likes of Tottenham, Sunderland, Wolves, and Leeds have a much easier start to the season across that first 10 games. And again, so quite interesting to see 2 of the newly promoted teams there to be adjudged to have a reasonably easy start to the season. Obviously, this is all conjecture and it's all based on statistics and win ratios and possible likelihood. And obviously, we know that the Premier League on any given day, any team can beat anybody, right? But it is interesting to see that the first 5 games has a lot of these teams having really bad starts, but actually it seems to ease
Well,
over into that 10-game period.
Palace is the best example of that. Based on the first 5 from Opta, they had the easiest of the fixtures, and then based on the first 10, according to the Fantasy Football website, they have the most difficult of fixtures. So that would obviously suggest that the next 5 are pretty difficult. Which, as you can see, they've got Liverpool, Everton, Bournemouth, Arsenal, and Brentford. So again, some equally tough fixtures for Palace.
And my takeaway from that again as well is that like whilst we're looking at that first 5 fixtures and we're going, okay, maybe that's not as easy as it first appears because obviously you've got 3 of the top 7 teams in there with Sunderland and West Ham thrown in. Actually, Scott, Palace's record against Liverpool in previous seasons has been pretty decent. It's been pretty strong. And likewise against Arsenal. And you would probably think that Everton and Brentford are winnable games, being that Brentford look likely they're going to lose in Bermo. Thomas Frank is out of there now. Everton obviously perennially have struggled in the Premier League over the last sort of 4 or 5 years. So it's interesting that it switches around with what they think is a more difficult back five, but actually it seems to contradict what we've seen in the head-to-heads over the years.
So I guess if you understand football and you know what you're looking at in tables like this, if you're looking for gems, hidden gems, I guess at the start of the season of who to pick, you look at Palace maybe and go, well, I actually fancy them in those back end 5 games, 6 to 10, because of the head-to-head historical, like you said, against Liverpool and Everton and Bournemouth, where
especially if you start well, Scott. Especially
absolutely,
you get some of those results against a Chelsea or a Villa or something.
yeah,
Maybe people won't expect.
yeah.
Then
But then a casual player will be basing their picks off these tables and going, well, I'm going to load up on Tottenham and I'll have a few Sunderland in there and Wolves. But this is where I guess tables like this can be a little bit misleading if you're not quite sure what you're looking at.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I think a lot of people will be looking certainly at Sunderland, particularly because obviously they'll be loaded up with much cheaper assets. So they'll go maybe like double up on Sunderland somewhere to bring, put money in the bank, and it might be completely misguided because it's based on this fixture difficulty rating idea, but actually their assets are completely unproven.
So we need something to build a team off, don't you? So when the game launches in a week or two's time, it's not just pie in the sky, lick your finger and see which way the wind's blowing, who to pick. So you go off tables like these to have a sort of a slight idea of what you're doing. Mix that with the price reveals to pick your individual assets and that. So Paul, when you look at a table like this, what sort of patterns and that are you looking for?
For me, I tend to have a view of what the promoted teams' fixtures are like, or who have them, I should say. More than anything, because they're usually the easiest teams to target at the start of the season. Again, because you're playing off them coming up and being fresh and not and potentially not being able to compete. So they're probably the first things I'd look at. And then secondly, I'd go on probably the what value players I want, as in what premium players first and foremost. I look at probably the price tags of the players and then obviously go through the players that performed last year. Like for example, do you have a Haaland or a Salah? Do you have both? Those kind of existential questions that we probably will be asking ourselves again this year, because I expect them to be similar priced again this year. So we probably will struggle to have both and pick, a really well-rounded squad. So again, these decisions will be up to us FPL managers to make. And again, same with the other end of the pitch. I will probably target the teams that performed well last year, because again, the historical data is stuff that we can bank on and use to our advantage to probably look past some of these red herrings in the fixture ratings. So, for example, Forest, we know they had one of the best defenses this year. If you look at their fixtures, again, Brentford, Crystal Palace, West Ham, nice. Arsenal. Do you avoid them in those red games, or do you bring them in? Again, Burnley, Sunderland. So again, do you think of attacking assets for them, for example, in those games, or do you stick to what worked well last year, was with their defence? So it's all those, I guess, existential questions that we will be asking ourselves when building our team for the first 5 to 10
So
games.
do you look at chunks like 5 games, or do you look longer term, 10, maybe more at the start of the season?
For me, I tend to play about 6 weeks at a time. I like to get a good chunk of games, because it gives you enough time to analyze whether your decisions are working. As to say, you give yourself 3 or 4 weeks to let your team bed in, unlike Darren, who probably changed his team 4 times once every week. So it just gives you enough time to analyze whether your assets that you've chosen are right or wrong, and then those you can then tweak it with those 4 on game week 5, 6. You can start to make some slight tweaks. Not to say that you don't make tweaks in those first games if someone really didn't work. You have an Nkunku, for an example, or or any crazy injuries or suspensions that crop up that possibly affect your team. But yeah,
Red cards.
yeah, Arsenal red cards. Other than that, I just yeah, I like to give my team some time to settle in. I don't know whether you're different. It'd be interesting to, I guess, get your guys' thoughts on that as well.
My personal take is I look for that one game week where the fixtures will swing for the big sides. So I sort of ignore the newly promoted sides to start with, and I drew a list of all the top six from last season and just sort of looked at where their fixtures headed. And if they started badly, like they had Arsenal with the first 5 games having pretty tough fixtures, at some point they're going to swing to easier. But at what point is that? What game week is that? And if that swing coincides with, say, Chelsea's fixtures or Liverpool's fixtures, then that's a good sort of wild card potential week to get ahead of the curve. And then you're looking at maybe just the first 6 weeks to build a team with that wild card in mind. And that's always my start point, is where that wild card will probably be played.
It's a good strategy because obviously that is probably the most important chip to change your fortune. So yeah, it's probably a good thing to.
Yeah. So looking at the first lot of fixtures, I mean, it's very difficult because there's no sort of pattern as such. All the big hitting teams all seem to have fixture swings all at different various times. I mean, I looked right up until game week 19 for this start. Game week sort of 12, 13 seems to be the period that Arsenal get on board. Liverpool's fixtures turn heavily, so do City's. Whether you can sit on a wild card until game week 13 is another matter, isn't it? And I think to start the season with that in mind is probably quite dangerous. You probably become quite placid in your thinking. And I don't like to do that. I like to be quite aggressive with my transfers and sort of forward thinking and that. So that causes a problem for me.
I think definitely going to be taking a bit more of a placid attitude this season. I was too aggressive last year. I kind of felt like I wanted to try and establish what I thought was going to be, a high performing team in the longer term, but I wanted to try and establish who those players were within that kind of like first 8-9 week period. So then, I've got like a kind of a good solid 11 player setup that, if I forget to make transfers or forget to make, swaps in and out and whatever else, I can feel like quite self-assured that actually I've got a really solid 11 regardless of who's in there. And, they were definitely like players that did do that. They were mainstays in my squad all of last season. Obviously, Salah was one of them. Haaland was there in the early stages. Chris Wood was there quite a lot. I got on Isak quite early, and so that they really did like carry me through some like really kind of like low scoring periods. Like they were my highest scoring players throughout the period of the year. But what I failed to kind of really do is do what Scott's done, is recognize those patterns of when those fixtures are going to swing, and actually building a team ready for those fixture swings, as opposed to building a team that's sturdy for like 12, 13 weeks at a time. Because as you say, like red cards, injuries, like goal droughts, like Cole Palmer is a prime example of that. Loads of people have had Palmer in their team from like the get-go last year, and would have been banking on him to like deliver consistently, and he did do that all the way up until about December, and then he just completely dropped off of a cliff. And you can't really account for that. Like you're really looking at those types of players, particularly at the price tag that he was last year, like 10.5 million. You're looking for them to be like the strong and sturdy assets to like keep you going. So that's kind of like what I wanted to do. I wanted to try and get like budget options, premium options, but that the ones that were returning consistently, and try and blend up a good squad of 11 players. And well, yeah, I failed spectacularly, unfortunately.
Did you bench boost game week 1 last year?
I did. Yes.
And it paid off, right?
Well, it did.
In the short term.
It's a good strategy.
Yeah, in the short term. I genuinely believe tactically that you cannot build a team for bench boost. Like there's no point in like planning 8-9 weeks ahead, getting your transfers in and going, game week 14 is when I'm going to use my bench boost because I've got 15 great players, because you don't know if those additional 4 players or additional 4 players are going to do anything for you. Tactically, it's not a chip that you can really plan for.
It only really makes sense when you've got double game weeks to really
That's true.
to really take advantage of it. But with that being less likely nowadays with the fixtures, it's kind of become fairly redundant as a chip. And like you say, with that in mind, it then becomes irrelevant to plan using it. So you end up just chucking it on a random week when someone's got an easier fixture, like a Salah's got a promoted side or something, and you just go, I'll go for that. Or whatever it may be. It's just it's hard to plan for it. So yeah, you're probably right. Did you find that you were chasing the points that you maybe felt you missed by either transfers you'd made or not made, for example? Is that where you
100%.
felt that you went wrong?
Yeah, 100%. Like there were so many examples of where like my finger was like hovering over a player of like, should I bring them in? Should I not? And actually the player that I decided not to do that transfer, or I had someone on my bench, for example, and I was like, should I bring them in? Should I not? And the player that was in my 11 did diddly squat, but the player that I thought about bringing in ended up having like double figure weeks. That happened to me so often. It's like it's unreal. But then that is the nature of the game, and I totally appreciate and get that. But you're absolutely right. I do look at that and go, well, objectively, I'm 15 points behind where I could have been. So then
And then you knee
I.
jerk to another
Yeah,
decision.
exactly. Yeah. I start looking
It
at.
probably goes wrong.
Yeah, exactly. I start looking
That's
at
FPL.
bringing.
You end up in a spiral.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Like I've already done 100 quid on the slots, but my next next £100, I might win 1,000.
I guess so. Within this mind, are you target any specific teams to start the season, Scott, or is there any players that you've got like earmarked that people should be thinking about for their game week 1 sides?
Yeah, so I wrote out a little like matrix. Again, like I said, I picked out the top 8 worst or easiest fixtures, so called, and just plotted out the first 5 fixtures and see how many times these teams played each other. And basically just wrote a real basic. So yeah, Spurs appeared 3 times, as did Forest, as do Fulham, as do Chelsea. So they're the 4 sides that you can pick assets from for those 5 game weeks that have the better fixtures. So I wouldn't advise you load up 3 players from each of those teams, but at least think about doing two Spurs players, 2 Chelsea, maybe 2 Forest, and a Fulham. Then I just made a list of their sort of talismanic players from those teams. Obviously, hard to do before you know the prices, but as long as you have a structure of the fixtures, I think fixtures is king. We have nothing else to go on but fixtures, because form sort of goes out the window because fixtures sort of breed form, if that makes sense. The better players obviously perform in the easier fixtures. So yeah, so I've got a list of about 20 players that I can pick from those teams that technically have repeated easier fixtures.
Nice. And I guess obviously, you got to look at last season's data to kind of highlight whether or not you're picking up defensive assets or attacking assets and whatever else, because obviously that's the only data that you've got to go on, right?
Yeah, so this was attacking data only that I've done so far, and I'll obviously do the same for defensive. And if those same teams correlate, then they're the players teams I'll be aiming at.
Nice. Okay.
Quick question for you guys: Do you think we can trust Spurs with their easier 10 opening fixtures? Do we think Thomas Frank is going to waltz in there and
Yeah,
make?
I do. I think that Spurs squad are strong. I think Ange lost his job because he wanted to play a brand of football which was almost suicidal at times. Frank will have them on the front foot. He plays very attacking football. They'll be slightly better structured defensively. They still will concede goals because I think defensively they're a little bit open. But I think as an attacking force, I mean, Spurs will score goals. So yeah, if they have the easiest 10 opening fixtures, then why not go for a couple of attacking options?
Yeah, I think that's for me personally, like looking at as well, like looking at assets that we highlighted at the beginning of last season. Like there was lots of good information there that we gave. Brennan Johnson, for example, was highly regarded in
Golden
previous.
boot, we tapped him up as a potential golden boot. And
Yeah, exactly that. And it didn't he didn't challenge necessarily, but he was Spurs's club highest scorer, and had they had a better season throughout the year, there's absolutely every chance that Brennan Johnson would have been threatening that kind of like top 5, top 4, golden boot if had that consistency. So for me, like I'm going to highlight like assets from those teams that I think people should definitely be looking at. I think Brennan Johnson would be up there. I'd say Pedro Porro would be up there again, as well as a defensive asset that has like attacking capabilities. Fulham, you know, I think you mentioned Paul last week when we were chatting about Iwobi, how he's come on quite a lot since playing for Fulham, very consistent. Anthony Robinson will definitely be up there again as a defensive asset that's in the you know leads the line for assists. I think it was 10 assists last year. Which is the most assists for a defender. Chelsea, Cole Palmer's definitely got to be there, right? Again, and hope that he can be a bit more consistent this year, or I mean, even if not consistent, like starts this year the way that he started last year and
on
get
Palmer,
them.
what price do you think he comes in this season?
I think he's got to stay the same. I can't see that they raise his price. Had he continued like his output from the beginning of the season into the second half of the season, we'd definitely start talking about him going into that 11.5, 12 million pound
But
range.
he still finished the season 200 plus and the fourth highest scoring player overall. So still a decent season.
He did, but he had like 12 game week run where he blanked, which is like 1/3 of the season as a drought is
I
pretty
think he
significant.
got 7 of his goals in 2 games. So again, he had it fits in Spurs. I can't see him rising in price. I think he'll probably stay the same, maybe even drop by 0.5, especially with the likes of Verts coming into the league as well in that midfield spot. It'd be interesting to see where they price him. Again, I'd expect him to be around the Fernandez price point, that maybe 8.5 to
So
9.
what about Saka, Paul? Because Saka obviously missed a massive chunk of the season through injury. I think he started the season at 10-5 last year. I mean, did they take that into account, his injury, and keep his price as it is, or would they lower his price down for his output?
Again, yeah, I don't know whether they take it into consideration with regards to his injury, but obviously he did spend like over 3 months of the season out. Maybe it probably would be good for us from an FPL perspective, means we can look at some more fit some more assets in. But yeah, I do think we are going to be of the age of juggling our premium or what premiums to pick again this year, which again is going to add to the fun of FPL. And again, more to it is finding those 4.5 to £6 million gems, really.
'Cause I was thinking about Verts and thinking he's probably a shoe-in for a lot of managers, but he's going to be priced at a really awkward. I reckon 9, maybe 8.5, like you said, 8.5, 9. If you're talking 10 for Saka, 10.5 for Palmer, and you're looking at getting Salah, Haaland, I mean, makes that Verts price awkward to squeeze in alongside Salah and a Palmer. So you might even have the decision where you go in Verts instead of Palmer.
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to have all those conversations to be had for sure. Because again, I think we've had the same with Bruno. Bruno's again at that awkward price point. Do you pay a little bit more to get maybe more guaranteed returns, or do you move the budget elsewhere in favour of that? So yeah, it will be. It'd be interesting to see how we come up with our first drafts and spend our £100 million.
Well, you're talking about price points. I actually think Bruno will be one of the ones that gets a bit of a hike in many respects. 2 seasons running, he looks like the only player that has wanted to play for United. His output has been incredible. His work rate, obviously, when you on the eye test, when you actually watch him play, is second to none. The that United squad seem to be strengthening as well with the likes of Cunha. There's talks of Mbeumo going in there as well, although it looks like Spurs might be hijacking that deal now with Frank going to Spurs. But like Fernandes, Cunha, Mbeumo in a kind of attacking kind of front three is.
Don't forget though, Darren, that United did come. Was it second, third on the hardest top first 10 fixtures?
They did, but what I'm saying is like the starting price tag is largely like based on the previous season's like
Yeah, but
output, right?
what I'm saying is, would you be going for a Bruno anyway?
I see. Yeah, okay, that's a fair point, but I don't know. I think maybe I think again, like if you're looking at assets that are going to output, and this actually comes back to kind of the age-old kind of FPL conversation, right? Is that it doesn't matter actually really about like the individual result. Man United can lose 3-2 every week as long as Bruno's getting those 2 goals. It doesn't matter. And again, so coming back around to the fact that Fernandes for me is by a long way the best player in that United squad, and the output probably does justify a price hike. Now, does that mean that puts a lot of people off? Like if he goes up to 10 and he's on an even kill with Palmer and Saka, Palmer and Saka probably have the preference over a Fernandes at that price point. Just saying that 8.5
Mhm.
last year seemed quite cheap for what you got in the end.
I think the interesting moves, if Mbeumo goes to United, and obviously they got Cunha there as well, that's 3 penalty takers from last season from their respective clubs. No one's taking penalties off Bruno, are they? And you could have a situation where Cunha might be priced higher than him, or at least a similar price.
Him and Brian and Mbeumo will both get price hikes, I would expect.
Exactly. So all 3 of them could have a similar price next season. Only one of them can take penalties, which is a huge swing in terms of potential point outlay. So that'd be an interesting choice if that's the case for United. Who'd you pick out of those 3?
It's not just penalties either as well. It's the direct free kicks, opportunity for Fernandes as well. I'm not too sure who took United's corners last year.
Bruno took most of them
I
as
think
well.
Bruno takes everything. He takes goal kicks, throw-ins. Yeah, he takes the oranges into half-time.
Yeah, I mean that's why he ended up with the amount of assists that he did last year, is because he's literally like putting it on a plate for everybody from every different angle, right?
I can't believe we're talking about United assets and they got the hardest opening 10 games. We're not going to have any United assets, are we? So let's
All right,
let's move on.
yeah, fair enough. Looking at some of the other teams, particularly on the lower end and the easier games. 2 of the promoted teams, they're Sunderland and Leeds. We will do a deeper dive on them in next week's episode. So we're actually going to go over Burnley, Leeds, and Sunderland specifically in a in-depth episode next week. But just off the bat, Scott, are there any assets there that you think might be worth looking at in the same way as Spurs and Chelsea and Fulham?
Before that, I hope when the pricing comes out that the FPL price everyone higher so that it makes the newly promoted sides a bit more desirable. That you look at them and go, well, we'll have a £4 million defender or 4.5 million. Whereas before you can pick a Livramento, say from last season, who was 4.5. Why would you choose a Burnley right back or a Leeds right back over a Newcastle right back? So I'm hoping that they price the better sides higher, which brings the newly promoted sides into the equation a bit more for those budget options. Then it makes conversations like this a little bit more sort of relevant. That brings them into the conversation, doesn't it? I was going to say that Job Bellingham would be my pick. Obviously you can't pick Bundesliga players because I really thought he was going to sign for Palace. We were heavily linked with him last summer. And pulled out at the last minute. Yeah, I mean, Leeds come up with a great record. My father-in-law is a Leeds man. He was round the other day giving me the lowdown on Leeds' chances. Perot, he said, is a hot shot up front. Watch him; he'll be priced nicely. I just feel that if Dan James, no disrespect to Dan James, but if he's your best player and he's tried and tested and failed at the Premier League level, I think you're in for a tough season. But yeah, I dare say when we do our deep dive, I like Sunderland. Is he a door the centre forward? he looks a bit of a player. Yeah.
I would probably highlight James Trafford as a potential one there as well. Again, I've gone typical me. I've gone to the team that have the hardest start across those 10 games, but 29 clean sheets last year. Potentially courting interest from a lot of Premier League teams. He might not even be at Burnley come the beginning of the season.
So,
If
Darren,
some rumours are
just a
to be
quick question. You're an advocate of that game week 1 bench boost. Okay, so you're looking at game week 1 fixtures only to start with. What's the plan to get out of that?
Okay, so I don't set my team up to just be strong in game week 1. It just happens that I don't really care when I use my bench boost. So the last 2 seasons I've just slapped it on game week 1. I don't set the team up to have 15 good game week 1 players by any stretch. I'm still playing it with a longer term vision in mind. I'm probably a bit like yourself, Paul. I play up to maybe game week 6 and I try and manage the fixtures as best as I can from that, really.
But so another strategy, if you're not doing the bench boost game week 1, is that you go really budget on the bench. My question to you was, do you spend more on the bench players because you are bench boosted in game week 1, as opposed to would you go more budget and have
See what
like a
you're
third
saying.
bench rider?
Yeah, no, it's not. It doesn't really factor into my thinking. I like to have a strong, solid 11, and that's where a vast majority of my budget goes. In previous years, like playing FPL like 5, 6 years ago, I didn't care who was on my bench. A lot of them were like £4 million bench riders. Probably would never play a minute in the Premier League. Like didn't really care. But now I do probably look at the 4.5 at the top end, maybe the £5 million assets that I think, if nothing else, they're going to get 90 minutes. Like if they don't do anything and they don't score, they don't assist, whatever. That's neither here nor there. They're low priced assets for a reason. But I do like to look at the 90-minute men as a bare minimum requirement to be in the team. If that answers your question, I don't know if that does.
Sort of yes and no.
Just a conclusion. Yes, I have cheap assets on my bench that play 90 minutes, and I have been very fortunate over the last 2 seasons that my bench boost has paid off, and those assets have either scored a goal, kept a clean sheet, got an assist. That's just kind of the depth of it, really. There's no real in-depth thinking about planning for a bench boost like that.
Okay.
What about yourself, Scott? Like you're talking about like kind of having like a 15-player team. Like where does the majority? Do you have like a plan where majority of your budget goes into a strong 11 and then a very weak bench, or do you try and like spread the finances a little bit and
No, historically, I would have gone for a really cheap second goalkeeper, maybe a play-in goalkeeper or a close to play-in cheapest option, and then pick a third bench option defender of a similar sort of 4 million and just left them there and only really used 2 subs, put all the money pretty much into the starting 11. But looking at the way the fixtures have been set up for the first sort of 19 game weeks, I think that strategy might not work. I think you might need bench cover because I'm looking at the fixture swings and it's not going to happen until sort of game week 12 or 13 where Liverpool and Man City and Arsenal have a bit of a swing in their favour, where you really want to load up on those players. And the only way of doing that is via a wild card. So I'm thinking spread the funds a little bit more for bench this year and sort of have options where defenders can permutate, where they'll have a good fixture one week and a bad fixture the next, and somebody else on the bench can come in for them. And a bit more sort of in-depth planning is what I'm sort of looking at this year.
Yeah, that makes
nice?
sense. So that's kind of what strategy I looked at towards the end of last season. Is I'd planned 4 weeks out, and like you say, had alternate players to swap for the weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Who was coming out and who was going in, and you'd already made those transfers in prep for that. So it didn't you didn't have to like panic on the week of going, oh shoot, I'm not prepared for that fixture. You were already
Yeah,
you'd made it.
yeah.
So yeah, makes sense. City, their fixtures for the first 10 are okay. They've obviously turned their form around towards the end of the season, and they've obviously dipped into the transfer market fairly quick with the Club World Cup deadline, etc. So they've got most of their assets in. I still think they've potentially looking at a wide wide forward from what I'm hearing. Are there any assets, like, would you be targeting them to start the season? Are you looking at a Haaland or any of the new assets that they've
Well,
brought?
I'm really interested in what price they go with Foden, because I think Foden's the forgotten man. He had such a poor season last year for one reason or another that he's going to have a price drop.
Yeah,
He could be golden. Yeah, I think he will do. Yeah. I mean, he could be golden. Just obviously you play the pep roulette game, don't you? I mean, because they brought in so many strong players for like that sort of attacking midfield role now, with Marmoush and Jerky, and still got Bernardo Silva kicking around, and you got Silvinho out wide and Doku, and there's so many options. But I think if they price Foden around the 7 million mark, he could be very, very tempting.
Yeah. Foden at 7 million. That's got to be a banker, right? You'd imagine if that is the price point that he goes in. That's
What did he start last season? What was his price?
he
You
was
remember?
was it
Was he about
9?
9?
He was about 9 last year, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if Foden is 7 million, that's got to be.
Well, yeah. I mean, he had such a poor season. Right? He even lost his place in the starting lineup. I can see him starting at 7. I mean, even if he's 7.5, that's still very tempting.
I don't think Marmoush will play the striker role as consistently as he did.
Yeah, but I think he's
last season.
asking if he was going to be classified as a striker.
Oh, I see, like the FPL classification.
Mm.
No, I don't think he will do. I think he was, because it was he was classified as a striker on last season's game, wasn't he?
Yeah, but I think you've got to play more. You'll play more minutes out of that position. So if you played, I don't know, wide left for 51% of the season, you'd be classified as a midfielder for this season.
Right, gotcha. So
Yeah, it's only if you play down the middle, you're classified as a striker.
okay. So we're thinking that Marmoush might get classified as a midfielder.
Personally, I think if he played more minutes down the middle because Haaland was out injured, wasn't he, for a while? I
Yeah,
think
I
he
just
still
think him
gets
being
classified
classed
as a
as a
striker, which
striker
is
means he's
a shame.
less of an asset for FPL, despite being a good quality point scorer, because he's going to play behind Haaland, likely. Saying that, Cherky's been there in pre-season so far. So be interested, maybe Marmoush might be out wide.
yeah,
Who knows?
that's a really good point.
I mean, on the classifications of players, I mean, you're looking at Cunha. He'll be moved to a midfielder in FBL next season, which makes him a tempting proposition as well, because that's one more midfielder and a striker that you lose, and potentially he'll play left. Do you think left in that formation? Pretty much where he played for Wolves.
Yeah, you would have thought so. But you mentioned previously that the Amarim system is like it's like 2 10s though, right? So like
Yeah, but
Out
he'll be
wide,
on the
Fernandez
left.
and
they
The
Cunha.
left
kind of
side
are
of that.
wingers,
Oh,
but
okay, right,
he
okay,
brings them
gotcha.
in. When they haven't got the ball, they
Sort of inverted a wee bit. Yeah.
Okay. So they're filling that like number 10 space, but from
Mhm.
out wide coming in.
Mhm.
Okay, all right. Yeah, that would be interesting to see that. I think if Marmoush is classified as a midfielder going into this new season, again, because what was he when he came in January? 7.5 million,
Yeah.
7 million.
Yeah.
Like he became such a great asset, like throughout that Haaland injury period as well. Half the price of Haaland almost
Mhm.
was, the returns were just as equal through that period of time as well. So if he is then classified as a midfielder, yeah, I mean, he gets the extras for the clean sheet. He gets the extras for goal scoring, and if he is playing in behind Haaland and he's getting plenty of assists as well, then it's
Well, what it means is you can double up on them a lot easier because you have one midfield spot taking the one striker, as opposed to them both being strikers and having two City strikers at your 3 options.
yeah,
It's
it's true.
always a bit tricky to make that work. There's one player that I really hoping they classify as a defender next season, and that's Lewis Skelly. And I hope they go cheap on him too. They priced Saliba and Gabriel like 6.5 and go sort of 5.5 on Lewis Skelly, because he will be an absolute steal and in most people's teams, despite Arsenal's tough opening 5.
I'm still going to be probably targeting Arsenal defenders to start the season, at least one. Again, planning probably further forward, because I still see us having one of the better defences. So I think it's worthwhile. And yeah, Lewis Skelly, if he is classed as a defender, would be
And he has to be, right? He played all
He
season
did,
left
but
back, didn't
it'd
he?
be interesting to see what happens because obviously Partey looks set to leave. The contract talks have stalled. So it'd be interesting to see. And then we've been linked to Gerald Hatto from Ajax, who plays centre half and left back. And obviously we're also clearing out Tierney and potentially Zinchenko as well. So there is potential that we could be quite thin on the ground, ironically, in left back. So we may,
You
but I
got
think obviously he
Calafiori
wants
can
two
play
in each
there.
position. And I think he'll potentially then, I'm just saying there potentially could be a move for Marzo Skelly to then be the understudy to Zubimendi at holding mid is kind of what I think could happen. But also we have been a link to Gueme from Sevilla, who's also holding mid. So again, it depends what happens in the transfer market, I think. Yeah, I think to start the season, I'll be surprised if he isn't the starting left back.
Yeah. And again, if he is placed as a defender in
He has to
FPL,
be. Yeah,
which
he
he
has to
probably
be.
should be because he obviously played a majority of the season at left back last season. Yeah. Then he's gonna get the extras for the clean sheets that he didn't get last year.
Well, he was a non-option last year, wasn't he? He was a ever present pretty much for Arsenal, but he was a non-option for FPL because he was classified as a midfielder.
Yeah.
He wasn't getting the bonuses that he should have been.
But he wasn't getting any of the top clean sheet odds, and you know, he was getting punished for goals conceded and things like that. Like you wouldn't normally get.
Yeah.
The one question for you guys
Interesting.
is:
Okay.
is Salah a dead cert in everyone's teams to start the season?
Yeah, I think he has to be, doesn't he? I think the form of last year is just ridiculous. Like it just did not drop off. Like there were no bald spots. Like there were just he was so consistent throughout the year that it's hard. I mean, it's going to be super hard to ignore him. I think if anybody starts the season next year without him in their squad, then they're watching a different game
I must
to
admit, I'm
to
looking forward
everybody
to
else. I'll tell you that.
Frimpong
So
overlapping.
this
I
is
must
where
admit.
so my thinking started drifting about Salah, about being an absolute guaranteed starter. And I started thinking about AFCON and when that was and how that will affect the sort of schedule. And it starts in game week 17 is the first game. So you think, well, it's a long way off. Why consider it now? The problem with Salah is that he has one of the best runs up until game week 17 that you could possibly imagine from game week sort of 13 onwards. So you're going to want him. So then you need a plan to get rid of him in 17. And I started thinking, well, that's easy enough. You just make a transfer and get him out. But then you got all the other African players that you may potentially have in your teams, like Marmoush and Ait Nuri, Ismail Assar, Mbermo, Vissa, Mazraoui. The list goes on. Nicholas Jackson. I mean, the list is endless. So now I started thinking, well, if that's the case, then you want to be wildcarding around that sort of time, which is what I was then got me thinking into, well, let's hold on to the wild card for that, make the most of that extra run that Liverpool have. And that's how I've sort of been thinking for the last week in terms of my strategy and what I plan to do. I think
It
based
certainly
around
does
AFCON.
turn the season upside down.
Interesting.
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. I guess just the one thing would be to kind of review how many assets you think of those African players you will have, really, to make it.
Well, what I don't want to do, I don't want to be hamstringing myself and not going for these players because I haven't got an out plan for them. If you end up loading up on 6 or 7 of them, so I'd rather have that wild card, so I'm not restricting myself to who I pick.
Yeah, that's true. Correct me if I'm wrong though, but AFCON typically kicks off in the January, right?
Yeah,
No, it's over Christmas. So it's over that busiest.
Okay, all right, okay. Because I was just thinking that where it normally, or I don't know why I've got it in my mind where
January.
AFCON normally took place during like the
January.
January. It used to be, right, okay. Because obviously you get that second wild card, don't you? Because you normally get the second wild card in the January transfer window. So actually it gave you the option to.
So yeah, so this starts before then. So it's game week 17. So the second wild card kicks in game week 20.
Okay. Fine. But I guess as well, like if you've got a team of like the core of your team or the core of your high performing players are all going to disappear to AFCON in 17, and you wildcard and build a team for like maybe 17 to 22, then you've got a wild card to then return back to that team and reinsert those
Exactly.
AFCON players
Exactly.
again,
Yeah.
barring injury, and
Yeah, but
if they've
you have
gone
the options.
further in, yeah, exactly. If they go far in the tournament or they win AFCON or whatever, then they get additional weeks off and time to come back and whatever else. But
So have you got that potential scheduling graphic there? Because that's an interesting one to briefly sort of talk around. Because the
yeah,
scheduling this year, isn't there 5 games over Christmas?
let me bring it up for you, and then
Scheduling's
we
heavy
can
Yeah.
have a
this
little
year.
look.
Certainly going to chopping and changing.
And then potentially in March, potentially there's teams that might not have a fixture in March at all, depending on how fixtures will land. Because you've got FA Cup, you got European games. There's all sorts of stuff going on.
So, as you mentioned, so AFCON kicking off around here, sort of December
Game week
20th,
17, yeah,
game week
December
game week
20th. Yeah.
17. Um,
So you look,
and
game
then
week 21 is Jan the 6th.
yeah, so it's but then that goes straight into FA Cup weekend as well. It's really interesting, isn't it? Like the game management between 17 and 22, 23 is going to be so crucial to where people end up finishing.
So that's why my thinking went straight away was that wild card to use around that sort of period is going to be crucial. If you've got it, you've got a
Game week,
massive advantage. I think just don't be too passive
game week
in your
17 to
transfers
game week 21
beforehand.
will be usually when Arsenal throw the towel in for the season. So maybe I'll follow this year. I don't plan well.
It's normally that period, isn't it? It's like January
West Ham or a Fulham
to
or something
around
at that
about
point.
January 20.
Kneecap us.
Yeah. You go, you begin the year. You just had Christmas. You've had your turkey. You've had a lovely New Year's Eve party. And you're going into those first weeks of January. The quadruple is on, and then by January 24th, you're crying into your pint because you're out of everything.
Christmas.
You're out of everything, yeah.
Wonder where it all went wrong. Yeah.
Yep.
Brilliant.
But another interesting period, that period in March, around game week 30. I mean, look at how few games there are in that time. There's one.
Where is that? Where am I looking? Oh yeah, March. So you got like game week 29, but then you've got like later rounds of the FA Cup, later rounds of Europe.
You got Europe.
Yeah. Oh wow.
Then you got the blank. Then you got the international break. Then there's quarterfinals of the cup, and then
Mess,
April
isn't it?
11th is the next week. So the teams potentially might not have a fixture in the whole of March.
Wow. That's pretty crazy to think
A
about.
league fixture, that is, yeah.
Yeah. No, I get it. Yeah. Because you've got that, the blank there on game week 31 with I'm guessing that's in line with the Carabao Cup final.
I think that is the Carabao Cup final.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. Highlighting as well there, the 2 double game weeks look like they're going to be right at the back end of the season again this year as well.
Yeah, because it's all based around the FA Cup, isn't it? So because the FA Cup has its own designated weeks again this year, unless there's a freak like the weather. And was it high winds? The Everton Liverpool game was called off last season. Always a potential that the odd game might get called off for whatever reasons, but yeah, only 2 game weeks, double game weeks this year. It's international breaks that do my head in. I mean, you play 3 weeks, then you got a break for 2 weeks, and you play another 4, and then you got another 2 weeks off.
Yeah. It's tough to plan for as well, isn't it? I mean, just again, like coming back to that back end of the season period there. So, as you mentioned there's only really 1 game week or technically 2 game weeks in the whole of March.
Yep.
Game week 29 and game week 30.
Yep.
You've got the FA Cup rounds, the later rounds of Europe. You've got the Carabao Cup final. The blank in 31 then immediately goes into international break, but then you've got a blank followed by a regular game week and then a double game week, and then that double game week immediately goes into a blank. It's just create like the player management and the free hit use and the wildcard usage is going to be so critical.
That's why, Darren, you have to save them. Because trying to navigate that with no chips is impossible, as you found out last year.
Yeah, because I was using like 3 or 4 transfers every week, basically in that back end of that period. Yeah, my rank dropped significantly. as
So
a result of
just
that.
quickly based on that, so they changed the rules last year about rolling transfers and having up to 5. And what was the highest that you boys actually
3, you
managed
mean?
to get?
3, yeah.
3, yeah.
Yeah, no, I never had a period of time where I had like 4 or 5
No,
free transfers to use. Which is, if you plan for it. I mean, but okay, as a question to yourself, Scott. I mean, you had an incredible year last year. You're well up amongst like the elite players of FPL. How many was there ever a period where you had 5 free transfers to use?
no. I mean, I like to play the game on the front foot and sort of try and get ahead of curves and things. I think 2, maybe a couple of times in the season I had, and I think 3 once. And that was towards the end when I was trying to build a better bench boost for the last game. But other than that, no, it was just single game weeks. Like maybe there was something to do with it being a new rule, not quite adapting to it. Maybe this season might be a little bit different, where we try and actually stretch this 4 and 5 to gain an advantage. But I think you play too passively if that's the case. You sat on your hands. I mean, can your team really perform consistently high for 4 game weeks in a row
Always
with
improvements,
no
right, that you
changes?
can make.
Probably not.
No, I mean
I guess when it sits there,
Always.
you want to use it.
yeah,
It's just one of those things.
Or you sat there and you're seeing all these players popping off that you don't own, and you want to get on those trends. And yeah, very, very difficult to. And then, as Darren knows, you don't make the changes for 4 weeks, and then you do, and then that player goes off the boil, and it's like
yeah. I like how I'm the standard for the low bar. By the way,
it's just you had all the crap planning and all the crap luck all
yeah,
rolled into one last season.
that's fair.
Hopefully your luck
Do we
changes a wee
expect there
bit
to be any new
along
rules
with
Yeah.
a bit
this
of
year,
planning.
or any rule changes at all, around point scoring or anything like that?
Talk of what, yeah, the talk of what I heard is that there's going to be changes. No one knows specifically what. I mean, they always tweak it. I'd like them to tweak the BPS ratings for defenders, because they were harshly punished
almost
last year for conceding
Took all
goals.
points away, right?
Pretty much. I mean, it was to stop the scenarios like Pedro Porro conceding 4 and getting an assist and then picking up 2 bonus points for that, which was what happened the previous season. It was to stop that sort of scenario. But I think they went a bit too far the other way. There were some defenders that were scoring goals and conceding 2 and getting no bonus. It was like, and defenders all scored. I think I run a list of the top 20 overall top point scorers last season. Not a single defender in there.
What do we think of the assistant manager chip? Do we think it was a success?
I thought it was interesting. I thought it was interesting, like how it forced us to use it in 3-week blocks. It was behind the mystery chip kind of curtain for majority of last season. We didn't actually know what it was until much later on in the season. I guess my question would be, do they just have it out in the open now as a 4th chip, or is the mystery chip going to be a thing that is used consistently, and it's just a lucky dip of what it might be, and we might find out in January what it is. Like, is it assistant manager? Is it another triple captain, like a secondary triple captain that you can use throughout the season? Like, they can come up with so many different things.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, there's lots of players that take this game very, very seriously, and they look at their historical rank finishes and things. And if they were to remove it for this coming season, it makes last season a real anomaly in terms of points scored. Because it's such a powerful chip, you could have scored 50, 60 points more than not having it. So that could have really boosted your ranks or lost your places if you didn't use it particularly well. So they've sort of created a little situation for themselves where I think they have to bring it this season as well. I wasn't a massive fan of it. It did make it interesting, I guess, because there was something else to use, but it definitely got in the way. Introducing it in game week 24 was so late in the season. And for those players that held on to all their chips, I had 6 chips to use in sort of the last 11 game weeks. And with the assistant manager chip going over 3 weeks, it only left, I think, 3 weeks free of no chip use last season. And it just made it a bit too congregated, and yeah, it just didn't work for me.
If I do remember rightly, once you'd activated the assistant manager chip, it locked the rest of your chips for those 3 weeks, didn't it?
Yeah, it's the only one you could use for 3 weeks, yeah.
Yeah, so if you activated your assistant manager, for example, you couldn't then use your triple captain on top of it. No, okay. Yeah, interesting. So, like you say, you had to plan those 3 weeks out in advance, and hope that your free hit, your bench boost, and your triple captain could be slotted in those
Do we
either the
see
weeks before or
any
weeks after.
changes to point score in regards to defensive-minded players, like tackles won, etc., or possession gained?
I'd love to see it. I think the consensus for the sort of the serious player base is that they don't want to see that. They're quite happy with the way the
it a
game's
bit more
set up.
complicated for the average player.
I think FPL have always got to weigh that up, haven't they? They've always got to weigh up the needs of the players that take it seriously against the majority casual fan base, I guess. But why not introduce it and in 2 years' time the casual fan base get
I
used
just
to
think
it
it
and
means
it
that we
becomes just
won't
a
all
regular
be just
part of the game.
buying players based on goals they score or assists they get, then make a whole different avenue to gain points. Then all of a sudden, defensive-minded players become a potential asset. Whereas currently
Sure.
Like a Zubamendi,
wouldn't
for
really
example.
be part of the thought process when picking your team.
Factor in. I guess the argument against it as well is that there is also or there is already a form of fantasy football that has this in.
I
It's
would
the
suggest that
Sky
we
Sports
complicate
fantasy
it.
football.
Just even something as
uses
simple as tackles won or something like that.
I think because the criticism of the Sky Sports one is that it is just too complicated to follow because it's a bit like a bonus points system, but it's based on ball recoveries, headers won, tackles.
It's all based on the actual detailed Opta stats, isn't it? And it does sort of
Yeah,
drill
but
down
you
into
could do
the
like
nitty gritty
tackles
of it.
won, for example, and it be a similar process to how they give points out for saves, something along those lines. So it's not complicated to understand. Tackles are quite easily recorded.
So you're saying like if a player makes like
Even if
two
it's like
successful
5, like
tackles, they get
saves,
like a
just do it
bonus
the
point
same
or
as
something like
saves, for
that.
example. Then all of a sudden, if Declan Rice scores a goal, gets an assist, and makes 10 tackles, all of a sudden it's a great week,
And he's priced at £15 million next year.
Yeah, again, more paramount, and that's just another.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm all for it, to be honest.
Right, listen, boys. I think we've had a really good in-depth chat about the first 5 fixtures and by extension the first 10 fixtures of this season. We've looked at the difficulty ratings for both. We've seen how planning in the short term and planning in the long term can look very, very different. We've given you insights on when you might be able to use your wild card, giving you an idea of how AFCON might affect your team much later on in the year as well. Just before we sign off, I'm going to put you boys on the spot real quick, based on everything that we've spoken about in this episode and looking at that fixture ranking list. Real quick, game week 1 captain selection straight off the top of the dome. Bowen,
That's a
Paolo?
tough one.
Go on, say Salah.
Be controversial.
Chris Wood.
Chris Wood, nice. Yeah, Scotty, I think I'm going to follow you. Bowen versus Sunderland. I think
we pick the
data
same
and everything else that you racked up. All right, okay. I'll go. I'll go for someone else. Let's have a look.
It's away, so it's good fixture.
Not a bad shout, is it? No. I'm sticking with Bowen. I think that's who I had off the top of my mind, and yeah, I think typically we'll see Sunderland targeted quite a lot throughout the season for captain picks as well. So, but just the fact that he was involved in like nearly 60% of all of West Ham's goals last year against the newly promoted side seems to make sense to me. So yeah, Jared Bowen as game week 1 captain. Awesome, boys. It's been a pleasure. I think that's a great first episode to get out there on the brand new YouTube channel.
Let's hope it makes it.
Yeah, we really appreciate the support as always, and we're going to do this whole thing. Like, subscribe, share, comment down below. In fact, actually, get in the comments down below. Tell us who your game week 1 captain is going to be. Let's get the engagement and the algorithm tickled a little bit, and yeah, let's get this this channel up where it needs to be, so as many people can see it as possible. Join us again next week, where we will be doing a deep dive on the 3 newly promoted teams. We'll be going through the assets in a much bigger way. Hopefully as well, we'll have a little bit more information in terms of like prices as they start to slowly filter out as well. But yeah, Paul, Scott, thank you very much for joining me again this week for the debut of season 5, YouTube debut as well. And yeah, look forward to chatting to you again next week.
So, yeah.